Hello, it's Romanosky from Calgary, Canada, and what we have here is a 1961 Jaguar Mark II 3.8 liter, and I'm shooting this from the Lugnuts facility in Calgary, and it's my series Land Rover that's getting put together right now. But I'll do this video on this Jaguar. It has a great history. Good documentation. We're going to put this Jaguar on Bring a Trailer. So this is a preview of the car. This car was bought, you can call it a one family owned car. It was bought by the current owner's father-in-law, brand new in Switzerland, from the dealer, Emil Frey. I think I have that name right. And then it stayed in Switzerland until 1977. It was sold to the current owner. He imported it from Switzerland to Canada, and it's lived its life in Lake Louise, Alberta ever since. The owner is a hotelier and used the car sparingly. It received a substantial refurbishment from XK Auto in Vancouver in the early 90s. So we have the invoices for that. We have the appraisal that was done on the car soon after that. And we have the maintenance records of the car since. So we'll have all that, all the images for those invoices on the Bring a Trailer auction, and I can flash them up on this video too. Okay, so we'll do a fairly thorough video on the car, and we'll start on a little bit of the history of the compact Jaguar saloons. You know, there's better sources for that information than me in this video, but I'll go through the basics, a brief history, let's say, and then we can go through why this Mark II is kind of the car that everybody wants in terms of a compact Jaguar. It has the most desirable specification and so on. Then we can do a close-up walk around of the vehicle, and we'll go through and show sort of all the different panels, chrome trim, etc., all the the flaws that are on the vehicle inside and out. Then we can do a paint meter reading showing you the quality of the bodywork and that it was done by reading the thickness of the paint. We will do a tour of the engine bay, and we will look underneath the car, take the vehicle out, and we drive it around the foothills of Calgary. Okay, so that's probably maybe an hour and a half of footage on this particular car, and the aim is to do an extremely thorough review of it and presentation for the buyer who may very well buy it sight unseen on an online auction. So I'll put in as much information as I can, and we'll break it up into contents, so you can just fast forward to the section that you might be interested in, and we'll shoot this video. So I'll turn the camera around, and thanks for viewing. Okay, so a brief history of Jaguar and how they came to make the Mark II. The company was started by William Lyons, later to become Sir William Lyons, and the company was SS Automobiles, and the SS was Swallow Sidecars. So he took, I think, £1,000 loan and found a really advanced motorcycle sidecar in alloy that was very high quality. He went into business making this sidecar, and later diversified into making bodies for other cars, mostly Austin 7s. So Mr. Lyons was a good businessman. He never asked for any more money. That was the only capital that he ever borrowed, that first £1,000. And they were up to making 10 bodies a day and so on, and had a good team of people and good morale and good spirit, as he said in those days. He came out with his first sports car, the SS 100, and there was a larger sedan, 3.5 liter sedan, and that kind of put Jaguar on the map as a manufacturer of complete cars. Post-war, he brought together a really great team of engineers, and they came up with a new twin cam engine. Mr. Lyons wanted an attractive engine. He wanted a twin cam engine. They experimented with 4 cylinders and 6 cylinders in line. And they came up with the famous Jaguar twin cam engine, which they took to Le Mans and won 5 times. So 2 times with a C-type and 3 times with a D-type in the mid-50s, early to mid-50s. Okay. They made of course, the famous XK120, came out in 1948. It was the sensation of the Earl's Court Motor Show, and there was waiting lists for this car. Max Hoffman was the importer in North America. William Lyons and Max Hoffman had a falling out because I think Max Hoffman was using kind of strong arm tactics and forcing dealers to take like 3 cars they didn't want to get one XK120. Of course, some things don't change, and they ended that relationship, and Jaguar became the importer of the cars. Okay, so that's kind of where we get to in the mid-50s. And they decided to, or William Lyons decided to make a compact sedan using the running gear from the XK sports car. And so they came up with their Mark I, which looked a lot like this, but with much smaller glass area. And they came out with it with a 2.4 liter engine version of the twin cam. So it was the Mark I 2.4. Later in the 50s, they put the 3.4 liter version of it, and it was the Mark I 3.4. And then that takes us to late 1959, and they come out with the Mark II. It has a bunch of improvements. We've got a 2.4, 3.4, and 3.8 liter version. Okay, so that sets the Mark II apart. Also, the proportions of the body and upper glass area are different, and many people, most collectors, consider this to be the quintessential compact Jaguar saloon. You could have an automatic, or you could have a 4-speed manual, or you could have a 4-speed manual with overdrive. This is the Moss gearbox that was also in the XK sports cars and the first E-Type. E-Type came out in 1961. Okay, so they make the Mark II from late 1959 all the way to 1967, and then it gets eventually replaced by the Jaguar XJ6. So in the 60s, the Jaguar had a kind of a confusing line of compact saloons. Concurrently, they made a decontented version of the Mark II called a 240 and a 340. Also later in the 60s, they came out with something called an S-Type and a 420. And these cars had a different front end and a larger boot and a different profile. Most people, most collectors consider, you know, the Mark IIs to be a little bit more attractive. Although, you know, the later 420 and S-Type, you know, had more room in them, especially the trunk. Okay, so that was a change they did to try to sell more cars to improve its practicality. But again, this is the kind of the quintessential Jaguar compact saloon. It's also the one with the racing history. Drivers like Mike Parks and, oh, I don't know, Roy Salvadori, you know, drove these in saloon car races at places like Goodwood. So the Mark II has a good competition history with it as well. Jaguar at the time made the sports cars, the XK or the E-Type. They made the compact saloon, which was either a Mark I or a Mark II, a S-Type or a 420, okay? And then they made their big cars, and they were the, you know, the Mark 7, 8, 9, 10, and then confusingly something called a 420G, which was a Mark 10. So they were the top of the line, large executive cars. They never really sold that many. In terms of production numbers, they sold a lot of these. They made, you know, 80-odd thousand Mark IIs, 25,000 Mark Is, and then, you know, maybe another 25,000 of the balance of the cars. There was, of course, a V8 Daimler, V8 powered Daimler version of the car with the 2.5 liter V8, okay? 2 Jaguars from the 50s and the 60s, you know, maybe they made, you can go look it up, but 150,000 of them. So they were quite plentiful. But the Mark II is the one that collectors value the most. And of the Mark IIs, there's 3 engines. This is the largest engine. And of course, everybody prefers the manual gearbox and the overdrive. So this is a 1961 Mark II 3.8 4-speed overdrive car on wire wheels. I did save a bunch of magazine articles, and these are all from the 1961, I think 60 and 61, and they all show Jaguar advertising their different cars. So I thought this was kind of interesting. Let's let you see these. So we've got the Mark II and the E-Type. There's the Mark II there, and that's from 1960, and that's the SS100 above it. And we see there's the big Mark X that shows you the the large car. And again, I thought this was kind of an interesting exercise, taking the back cover of Road and Track in all those years. Okay, so let's do a walk around on the 1961 Mark II. I'll show you each of the panels, all the different chrome strips, the glass. We'll have a look at the interior, the headliner, the seats, the carpet, the dash, all the wood, etc. I'll point out everything that is a flaw, and I'll try to be as thorough as I can. I also have a paint meter. And so lastly, I can run over the car with a paint meter to give you an idea of course, how deep the paint is and if it's hiding any filler, which it isn't, but I'll show you that on the video. Okay, so now the car was refurbished in the early 90s in Vancouver by XK Motors. They did the paint, they did some rust repair to the lower doors, the lower fenders, and sills. Originally the car was pearl gray and it is now white. It was also retrimmed. They used Connolly hides, which you can't get anymore. So the proper leather, proper carpet, and proper headliner. I didn't see evidence that the wood was refinished, but that is possible that they did that too. Okay, so it was about $40,000 in around 1992, 93, and in that era, restoration work was, $40 an hour or something. Now it's more like $140. So $40,000 spent then. I don't think you could do the same work for $100,000 today, okay? So if you think you're gonna get a deal and buy a Mark II that needs an engine and gearbox rebuild, a new interior, and a body restoration, you would definitely be far ahead getting this car than doing the work now. Okay, so let's start here. Overall, the car shows as really nice. It's not a show car, it's not a concours car, but it's a very nice example. Let's call it a really nice driver. I don't see any orange peel in the paint. I don't see any waviness on the sides of the car. There's no dents or scratches that are material. There's a couple marks in the paint. There's the odd stone chip, and that's it. Okay, so we can start with the windshield. We have the odd mark, the odd stone chip. The windscreen seal is still pliable. The chrome trim, or I guess that's probably chrome. On the windscreen looks good. There's maybe, very light scuffing on it. The wiper blades are still supple, and there is no major scratches. We can see a little bit of overspray on the seal for the vent flap, and we see a few little chips at the trailing edge of the hood. This is an aftermarket period correct mirror. And then we can see the Talbot lettering on it. The chrome on the bonnet looks good. The leaping cat looks good. The Jaguar badge is faded a bit. There's very light scratching on some of the chrome. It all looks pretty good. Again, consistent with a nice driver. This vehicle shows 51,000 on the odometer. It is believed to be 251,000 kilometers. We can see a dent on one of the bumper overriders. One of these Lucas lights has a crack in it. There is the odd stone chip. You can see a few little paint imperfections around the lights. The wire wheels they're the original wire wheels that were re-spoked with stainless spoke from Dayton. So they were rebuilt instead of new, so they're original to the car. We see the side trim on the passenger side, and this all looks pretty good. The trim on the doors looks good. Light scratching on the door handles. The side trim looks good. Rear window trim all looks good. So all this chrome is pretty nice. It has got, light marks. It's all straight. It's not dented. You can't really fault it for the age. And it's tough to get good reproduction pieces, okay? So this is all original to the car. There's some light marking on the strip, okay? These hubs or nuts for the wheels are designed to take a wrench, so they don't have the ears on them. We can look through the rest of the trim. A little bit of pitting on the bezel for the rear lights. The rear bumper looks good. A couple marks on the overrider. We have this sign. This car has disc brakes, which was a feature of all the compact Jaguar sedans. The C-Type won Le Mans, and many credit the disc brakes for winning that. So they came out with these in the passenger cars. So you get a little sign there, or a little badge to tell people that it is disc brakes and be careful. And sure enough, the brakes are quite powerful on this car. Here is the distributor, Emil Frey in Zurich, Switzerland, where the car was bought. We can see, a couple minor cracks starting and a little bit of fading in the lights. The exhaust would have been replaced in the early 90s, I believe, and I believe it's all stainless. We'll go check that later. Fuel filler cap. You can see a little bit of rust starting where the paint's rubbed off. The boot's a little bit dry in there. Rear window, the stainless trim is a nice shape. The seal is still supple. There's no staining on the headliners, and the wood is all excellent. There was some leakage, I think, on the passenger side onto the wood. So these are not quite as watertight as they could be, and they at one point did damage the wood a little bit. I'll show you that. Otherwise, there's no interior, no water in the interior which has stained anything, okay? This side of the car, again, is consistent. We have a couple little dents here in the window trim, but it looks pretty good. Side trim's excellent. Side windows are excellent. And there we go. There's no obvious, actually there's one touched up mark here. On the fairing here, you can see that this was scraped and was touched up. Other than that, I guess you can see a little bit of touch up on the fit of this door. Looks like it was a little bit off. Other than that, it's pretty tough to fault. I mean, if you get 10 feet back, you're not going to notice anything. In terms of gaps, you know, because the car's never been apart, it was not substantially cut up for rust repair. You know, there was repair sections put in, but that means that the door fit is still good, okay? So we can see the gaps of the front door and the bottom of the front door are all uniform and quite excellent. And the way the door is shut is really nice too, okay? So if you have a car that's been badly rusted and has had new floors and new sills and new fenders and reproduction parts, it's very, very difficult to get everything to align properly and to get the doors to fit. And even when new, these cars were fettled, as they say, to get everything to align properly. So door gaps are nice, the hood fit. You know, we can see the gaps on the hood are nice. And let's look on this side too. Yeah, so they're very good, okay? So, and like I said, the doors close nicely. Okay, so, you know, from this distance, you know, it's you know, it could be a show car, but on very close examination, you can see some lightly scratched chrome. A few of the pieces have a little bit of pitting. There's the odd stone chip. There's the odd masking mark. You know, which is consistent with it being, you know, a nicely taken care of driver, and you know, not it was never intended. The owner never needed to have a show car or wanted a show car. He just wanted a nice Jaguar to drive, and so the work done was consistent with that. But he used all the right parts, all the right materials, and used Jaguar specialists and, you know, experienced mechanics to always have looked after the car. It drives really nicely, as you'll see in the driving video. Okay, so inside the car now, we'll have a look. You know, these interiors would be extremely expensive to restore today, and you can't even get the materials, okay? So between the, you know, the wood, leather, and the headliner and so on, I mean, I'm sure you could spend $40,000 on the interior alone. Okay, so the window surround is good. We have the vent window here. We've got evidence of a little bit of water ingress where the lacquer is pulling a little bit off the wood there. The other side's a little bit worse. And so there's some deterioration of the wood along the window, very minor. I think that's original. Door cards are nice. There is no tears. There's nothing cut into them. And the chrome handles are nice. Okay, let's look at this one. Again, the chrome surround for the windows is in nice shape, and the wood, a little bit loose at the trailing edge, but it's in pretty nice shape. There's no water damage there. And the door pockets are in good. We can see at the bottom edge of the door, there's a little bit of corrosion that's just starting, but you know, considering this paint was put on the car in the early 90s, I think you're doing pretty well there. Okay, so we're just looking at the sills, and again, it's not pristine in the door jambs, but it's pretty good. Okay, the seals are still supple, you know, decent. I'll look in the door jamb here too. Door striker. You know, a lot of the cars, if they're not put together properly after a restoration, you'll see lots of scuff marks around this area here, or evidence that it's moved in an attempt to get it fit. Looks like we're missing a bolt down there. I might have one of those. We'll put it in. Okay. And the bottom of the door here. And again, there's some evidence of light corrosion just where that metal has been crimped back. Okay. There's the striker. Let's do all the doors and the trunk. Okay, so this is the worst of the wood because there was water again let in from the vent screen, and so the lacquer is just peeling a little bit there. The rest of the piece looks okay. Again, there's a little bit there that's peeled off. And this piece here, again, it's a little bit loose, just like the other one, and there's some evidence that it's peeled up. Otherwise, it looks good. The door card looks good. Here are the sills. Weather stripping still supple. Door striker and the door sill. I just washed the car, so there's a bit of moisture there. Okay. Okay. And here we go. You know, you could probably refinish these sill plates to good effect. Wood on the top of the door is nice. The chrome opener for the window is in nice shape. The door card is in nice shape. Again, that's fairly recent. Probably almost nobody's ever sat back there. Okay. Trunk area. Okay, so, well, it's repainted under there. We've got the new weather strip in, which is still supple, and we can see that it hasn't been repainted in the trunk area. We will lift this up, and we see some light. There's no soft metal there. That's a drain hole. Some light corrosion in the corners here. No soft metal, no rust that's flaking. Just this could be touched up with some Por 15. So that would be something I'd do just to seal it. Okay, and then here we've got the underside of the spare tire cover, and try to get this here. This is the tool kit. We have the wrench for the tire and a mallet. Okay, let's look at the Jaguar toolkit. All right, so looks like we've got everything. We're spanners. Looks like we're missing one pair of pliers and whatever used to live in there, but the rest of it is intact. Okay, that's the toolkit. Okay, so, you know, it could use a little bit of tidying in this area if you wanted to do that. But again, there's no soft metal, there's no rust flaking. But it could get cleaned up a little bit. All right. The Jaguar license plate bracket and light, and the emblems are in good shape. Okay. Let's look at the wood on the dash, the A-pillar, the top of the dashboard, A-pillar on the passenger side, and this upper rail. All that's really nice. And then we continue this wood trim, original lights, all the way to the back, and there's the rear light. So all of that looks beautiful, actually. All of that's in nice shape. We have a Nardi wood rim. Don't have the original steering wheel. And this is pleasantly patinaed with a great feel to it. And that is an aftermarket period rim. So that's, I think that's been on the car for almost as old as it is. Okay, so the rest of the wood on the dash is really nice. No cracking to the lacquer, and still presents really great. Instruments, all the switchgear is original. Instruments are nice. It's showing 50,262 kilometers. All the instruments work. We can see that in the driving video. All the switches work. We went through all of those. And the dash is excellent. The center console is excellent. Okay, and the carpets show a tiny bit of wear, but are, you know, essentially new. And we can see the pedals have appropriate wear considering the 250,000 kilometers that are believed to be on the car. I'm sure that's correct. Let's have a look down here. And again, the carpets are in nice shape. And all the trim looks like it's really done well. Okay. And in the back, I don't think anybody's ever sat back there. Wood trim is excellent on the doors. And we have the picnic tables. Tiny little mark on the upholstery where it's fouled by this little screw, so that can be fixed. We have seat belts. The carpets in the back are great, and it looks nice in here. And the wool headliner and visors are perfect. There's no staining. Well, actually, look at it. You can see some very light discoloration along this edge. Okay, but I didn't even notice that until just now. Okay. Rear parcel shelf is excellent. Okay. We'll have a look under the engine and we'll release on the passenger side. There's a little chip right by the leaping cat. Okay, so it's nicely weighted on some hinges. We can see all the original parts. The engine is original to the car. We have the twin SUs with the starting carburetor. So there's no choke on this. It's there is an electric switch, temperature sensitive. There's a bimetallic spring in there, and when it gets up to temperature, it shuts off the starting carburetor, okay, which works fine. We see the engine bay would be original paint in there, I believe. Actually, maybe not, because we got a little bit of overspray right there. And again, it's not trying to be a show car, but it's all complete and all original. It's got the correct cloth wiring harness. The washer bottle, well, obviously that doesn't work anymore, the line's been cut there, okay, so that doesn't work. Down around, we see sort of original, you know, original finishes, but all in really nice shape, okay? A little bit of overspray. In the engine bay, that is the chassis number of the car, okay? All right. The next thing we can do is we can use a paint meter, and this will show us the depth of paint in micrometers. And so when we, that would be 0.778 of 1 millimeter, and we're showing paint depth of usually between 0.5 millimeter and 1 millimeter, which is consistent with a repaint. It wasn't down to bare metal, so the original finish should have been sanded and then another coat of paint put on that. And so each coat of paint's around, you know, 300-400 micrometers. So what you'd be looking for, or what normally you'd look for, is big inconsistencies and places where, you know, you don't get a reading at all because it's all Bondo, and we don't find that with this car, okay? So, you know, the differences are within, you know, 1 millimeter. And again, there's two coats of, there's the original paint and the factory paint and the repaint on top of that. Okay, so we're getting, let's call it 1 millimeter plus or minus 0.5 or something. And when I did this before, I didn't find any place that was scary or that would lead me to believe there was excessive amounts of filler anywhere in it. Where you'd notice it the most is the bottoms of the the sills and the doors and so on. And it is a little bit thicker down there, but we're still within in the range of 1 millimeter. And that's the original primer and paint, and then it was sanded down, and then it was reprimed and repainted. So that gives you, a brand new car would have a depth of maybe 200 micrometers or 0.2 of a millimeter. Okay, so we're not seeing anything scary in these in these kind of critical areas. The cars will also rust, just about any car, in the headlamp bezel area. And at the base of the windscreen. That can be a trouble area for lots of cars too. And it isn't here. On the roof, it's not a good sign if there's lots of filler on the roof. And there isn't. Okay, so that shows, evidence of a repaint over the original paint, and so we're getting, between about 500 micrometers to 1,500 micrometers, half a millimeter. Some of the lower panels, the lower doors that have seen some rust repair, there may be up to 1.5 millimeters, but that's the worst of it. So that's pretty good. Especially since the metalwork on this car was done in the 30 years ago. Okay, so that sums up the walk around on the Jag. I hope you agree that it's basically just a really nice driver, and the car has never been apart, so we still have good panel gaps, and this is matched by the way it drives, there's some intangible elements to that. Everything just works together really well. The brake feel, steering feel, noise, vibration, harshness, etc. All of that is really hard to duplicate with a restored car. So this works well, feels good, sounds nice, and it's actually a real pleasure to drive. You'll see that if you go to the driving video. Overall, the walk around video, shows it to be in really nice shape and a nice example of a car. They made, 150,000 of these. Most of them were, at one point in their life, were almost free. They were repaired cheaply. And so finding one from one family owner that's always had good care is pretty rare. Okay, so thank you very much for that, and we'll move on to the undercarriage of the videos. We'll show you some photographs of what it looks like underneath. Okay, so we've got the Jag Mark II 3.8 on the hoist, and I'll do this part of the video. We'll go underneath the car. We'll do a close examination of the floors, sills, outrigger, trunk floor, all the usual trouble areas for older cars. Just about any car from the 50s, 60s, or 70s would have the same issues. We'll look for leaks around the engine and get an overall sense of what this car has been through since it went into service in the early 60s. Okay, so we'll turn this camera around and let's go through it. Okay, so this car has never been restored. It's never been taken apart. It's been given, you know, the maintenance that it needs. It's had some body work done, metal work to the lower sills, lower fenders, and the floors, I believe. Let's just go through and we'll look and see if we can determine that. We can get a general sense of the corrosion or lack thereof underneath. I mean, of course, any car that is unrestored from the early 60s is going to display some corrosion, but this is not a rusty car. You can see all of these bolts are rust-free. I'm sure they would all come apart easily. We can see the bottom of the engine actually looks pretty good. There is, I mean, when it sits here, you know, there's the odd little spot of oil, but there's nothing that I would consider to be a big leak. When it had the inspection at XJ Auto, I think that Sid noticed the worst of it being from the pinion seal on the rear diff. And I think he said that the front crank seal was leaking a little bit too. But, you know, if it is, well, I'm sure it is a little bit, but I really can't detect any large leaks, material leaks on the underside of the engine. Let's just have a look in there. Well, it's maybe a little bit wet up there. Oil pan. There's the front of the crank. And let's just go look up there. There's the oil filter. Actually, it looks pretty dry. A little bit wet at the bottom of the bell housing there. But we can see, you know, all these, looks like it's had new ball joints at some point. And there's disc brakes. This car was unusual for having four-wheel disc brakes in 1960. We can see a little bit of overspray there on the suspension, but it all looks actually pretty good. Frame rails, outriggers, jacking points, you know, that all looks pretty solid. There may be some new metal that's let in here. I see a seam down here, so that looks like it was welded in, so that looks like new metal there. And let's just take a look at the seam. Well, we can see the you know, the details on the ribbed floor pan haven't kind of rusted solid. It's not filled with Bondo, as you might see in some other cars. The jacking points are in good shape. Suspension pickup points are in good shape. You know, none of that looks rusty to me. It's kind of got an unusual spring arrangement, doesn't it? That'll be a concave spring, I guess you'd say. And let's just look a little bit greasy back here, but that keeps everything unrusty. You see the brake hoses are recent, and you know, the floors look good. Can't really tell. There's possibly newer undercoating on the center portion of the floors, so that it may have had, in fact, floors put in. But if they did, it was a decent job. And there's certainly no issues with, you know, holes in the floor or, you know, again, Bondo filling the side sills. So it actually looks pretty good. The frame rails look straight. And let's go back here. And yeah, so we can see a little bit wet at the base of the differential. These were the last of the live axle Jaguars. After the Mark II, the S-Type would have had the IRS system from the E-Type. And that's had some benefits, but racers liked this axle because it was a little bit stiffer, I think. And it's certainly a lot easier to do a brake job on this car than an IRS car. So it looks like we've got some newer calipers in the rear, I would say. And, you know, somebody's been in there with maintenance. You can see new clips and so forth. And the exhaust, well, I'm not sure about that, but at least the pipes are recent and the mufflers are recent. Looks like the rear, I would say the rear section of the exhaust is fairly recent. Maybe not as recent as the front section, okay? I don't see any holes in the floor on this rear valence area. That, you know, that a lot of dirt can get caught up in these areas, and that can just be filled with muck and rust. And it can take out the well for the spare tire, and then the trunk floor can rust. And it just isn't the case here. This all looks pretty good. I mean, if you look really closely, well, even then, there's some evidence of some corrosion just starting, but keep in mind, this was done in the 1990s, you know, so for it to have held up this well over basically 30 years is a testament to the rust-free nature of the car and the work done, you know, in 3 years it would come back if he was hiding a lot of sins. So this is fundamentally a good body on the car. You can see some evidence of filler, you know, on the sills, so they would have been replaced. Very, very slight evidence of some bubbling. Well, one bubble at the base of the door. A little bit of overspray on the outrigger there. But I must say, it's pretty good overall. You'd be hard pressed to find an unrestored Mark II with a cleaner undercarriage than this one. And, you know, if you found a restored car, you know, I mean, it would be $100,000. So for a good driver, has been maintained by qualified mechanics, European and Jaguar mechanics. Received $40,000 approximately worth of renovation work in the early 90s, and then has been sort of, you know, lovingly cared for, you know, basically its whole life. So it's a really unusual car in that respect. You know, we can see the disc brake sign there warning people that the car will stop faster than most cars of the era. But okay, so with that gives you an idea of what's underneath this Jag Mark II, and we'll go on to the next section of the video. Okay, so now we will do a cold start video. It's about 14-15 degrees Celsius, and the the Jag Mark II has been sitting overnight. So it's cold, and we'll see what happens and what comes out of the exhaust pipe, and have a look at the oil pressure, etc. So I give the SU fuel pump just like 2 seconds to pressurize, clutch in, and hit the start button, and it's always on the button. This is what it looks like when it's running. So let's start the driving video of this 1961 Jaguar Mark II 3.8. 4-speed manual overdrive car. So I've just driven the car across the city. It's about 35 minutes. I've been stuck in traffic. It's about 20 degrees Celsius. So the car is fully up to temperature. Even in, 4 light traffic jams where we were stationary for a good 15 minutes, the water temperature never went above halfway on the gauge, which I think is 70 degrees. So this car doesn't overheat in traffic. And to my knowledge, it's had no history of overheating, which is important with an aluminum engine. Okay. This car starts on the button. I'm not even sure it gets a complete crankshaft revolution before it fires. These Jaguars had a starting carburetor, which was a third carburetor that enriched the mixture upon startup, and the device is made up in part by a bimetallic spring that changes its shape depending on the temperature. And so when it's cold, it has one shape and makes one connection, and then when it's warm, it makes another shape and makes another electrical connection. So this system has, in Jaguars, been troublesome. Many owners have disconnected it and just put the operation of the starting carburetor on the switch. This one does work perfectly though. And you can definitely tell when it's cutting in and out. So the cold start enrichment of this car is per factory. Okay. So it starts on the button. It warms up properly. It's not overly rich, and then it settles down to a nice idle. Oil pressure at cold is 40-50 psi, and in the several days that I've driven it in traffic, I've never seen it go below 10 psi per every 1,000 RPM, which is sort of a standard of healthy oil pressure. There's no warning lights. No instrument lights come on. We're in fourth gear now. The overdrive does function. You can see it just has come on. If I push this lever up, it goes back out of overdrive. This is a fast car. No trouble running away from city traffic. The car has very sure braking with a recent brake booster that was just put in. It stops straight and accelerates hard. Handles nicely. It's tidy. It's a reasonably challenging road here, and we will drive it spiritedly, but not illegal. It's nice through the corners. There's no bumps from the suspension. There's no suspension noise. There's no axle whine. The operation of the gearbox is positive. Works nicely. Handling is very tidy. It's a real pleasure to drive. And if I didn't mention this, it's a properly fast car, like even for today. fun. What this must have been like in the mid-60s in the UK, when the police were running around with like 1-liter motor cars, you know, Minis and Austins and so on. This is fantastic. No wonder it was the favorite car for the criminals and gangsters and bank robbers. I mean, this is a fast car today. So of all of the compact Jaguar sedans from the late 50s to the late 60s, this is the most desirable specification. It's a Mark II 3.8 4-speed overdrive. This is the one that collectors want for those reasons. And still today, you know, BMW is credited with coming out with the sports sedan concept with their new class 2002s. But this predated that by 10 years. I can't think of another car from the 50s that deserves the title of sports sedan more than this Jaguar. I don't know if maybe there is one, if somebody wants to comment on it, but I think that in fact that this car is the first sports sedan. You know, it's got a racing derived engine and gearbox proven in competition in a 4-door box style. So I think I honestly can't think, I'm sure there's something, but I can't think of another car sold in volume that predates this car that could be considered the first sports sedan. Handles nicely, it's tidy, the lead is manageable, gearbox is nice, crisp.